I want to start with some stories about the climate that, as you know, every time we talk about this particular topic, are not particularly wonderful stories. This is in The Guardian. Humanity can't equivocate any longer. This is a climate emergency. This is by Rebecca Solnit and Terry Tempest Williams. The climate emergency has been declared over and over. The future the scientists warned us about is here now. We are, excuse me, we are declaring a climate emergency. Everyone can, in whatever place on Earth they call home. No one needs to wait for politicians anymore. We have been waiting for them for decades. What history shows us is that when people lead, governments follow. Our power resides in what we are witnessing. We cannot deny that Great Salt Lake is vanishing before our eyes into a sun-cracked playa of salt and toxic chemicals. Nor can we deny that Lake Mead is reduced to a puddle. In New Mexico, a wildfire that began in early April is still burning in late July. Last August, the eye of Hurricane Ida split in two. There was no calm, only 190-mile-an-hour winds, ripping towns in the bayous of Louisiana to shreds. And 7 million, acres in the American West burned in 2021. The future the scientists warned us about is where we live now. The climate emergency has been declared over and over by nature and by human suffering and upheaval in response to its catastrophes. The 2,000 individuals who recently died of heat in Portugal and Spain are not here to bear witness, but many of the residents of Jacobabad in Pakistan, where Amnesty International declared the temperatures unlivable for humans, are. The heat-warped rails of the British train system, the buckled roads cry out that this is unprecedented. The estimated billion sea creatures who died on the Pacific Northwest coast from last summer's heat wave announced a climate emergency. The heat-devastated populations of southern Asia, the current grain crop failures in China, India, across Europe and American Midwest, the starving in the Horn of Africa because of climate-caused drought, the bleached and drying coral reefs of Australia, the rivers of meltwater gushing from the Greenland ice sheet, the melting permafrost of Siberia and Alaska, all bear witness that this is a climate emergency. So do we. Yet the anxiety we feel, the grief that is ours, pales in comparison to the ferocity of our resolve. Obviously, the inaction on this issue, you guys, is beyond egregious. There is not a strong enough adjective to describe the nature of this inaction on behalf of public officials the world round. And the media as well is quite complicit. And that's actually kind of where I want to draw your attention to here for a moment. I'm sure a number of you saw this, but like I said, I haven't been here for a couple of weeks. So I wanted to make sure to show you all this clip just in case you hadn't seen it. This is, there have been a number of times ever since Don't Look Up came out where the media essentially mimicked that famous scene in Don't Look Up where they're trying to say, like, this is serious and you're making light of it because you don't want to be negative, right? This was another real life example of that. So first they show the Don't Look Up scene, and then they show a scene from British media talking to a meteorologist who is acknowledging the extent of this heat wave. And they're literally telling him, oh, you're so negative. Why are you so negative? This is a really remarkable clip. We'll take a watch, come back and discuss.
Are we not being clear? We're trying to tell you that the entire planet is about to be destroyed.
Okay.
Well, it's, just something we do around here. We just keep the bad news light.
Oh, you see, John, you're outside enjoying the sunshine. It's not too hot, is it?
No, it's absolutely lovely. It's 20 degrees out here. It's perfect. But on a serious note, folks, by early next week, you can scrap 20 degrees. It could well be 40 degrees. I think there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of excess deaths early next week. The charts that I can see in front of me are frightening. So we all like nice weather, but this will not be nice weather. This will be potentially lethal weather for a couple of days. It'll be brief, but it'll be brutal.
Oh,
so,
John,
we can.
So John, I want us to be happy about the weather and everything. I don't know whether something's happened to meteorologists to make you all a little bit fatalistic and harbingers of doom. Because all of the broadcasts, particularly on the BBC, every time I've turned on anyone's talking about the weather, they're saying that there's going to be tons of fatalities. But haven't we always had hot weather, John? I mean, wasn't the summer of 76? That was as hot as this, wasn't it?
No, and we are seeing more and more records, more and more frequently, and more severely. So yeah, some people always hark back to the summer of '76, which was a freak event 40 odd years ago, over 40 years ago. But heat waves are becoming more extreme. This is yet another one which is coming down the tracks towards us. And I don't think
just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's like, do you hear the words coming out of your mouth? I've used this analogy before, but if you know a tsunami is coming, do you sit there and say, I'm going to keep playing at the beach because I don't want to acknowledge the tsunami? That would be negative. Oh, that would be fatalistic. I'd rather sit here and play with my kids at the beach. I mean, it's like flat out not sane. It is insane. But they just, and I'm sure there's some producer in their ear like, oh, this is too negative. We're going to lose viewers if you let this keep going. But it's like, look at that incentive structure. This is part of the problem of capitalism, you guys. When it comes to information sharing, you have this incentive to make a profit instead of doing quality or objective or responsible journalism in any meaningful way. And it's also interesting that, it's okay to be negative and fatalistic if you're talking about like what Putin's doing or something. Like there are these with war or with there are issues where it is acceptable to be that negative and fatalistic. And I think that just has to do with who's making money off of it and who's threatened by it. It's a sad commentary on our economic structure and on some of our social structures, right? You can't talk about climate change because that doesn't just impact the poor or racial minorities or people across the world. That's going to impact everybody. So cable news stays away from it, and media outlets in general stay away from it. Even when they're talking about it, it's not exactly front page news, with some exceptions. I've shouted out Common Dreams before. They do a great job. There are others, but on the by and large, the media really avoids it like the plague. And I think it's for the reason that they just unwittingly acknowledged in that clip. And I think Don't Look Up satirized it perfectly. Because their entire existence is based on short-term ratings, their incentive is to ignore these problems or minimize these problems or deflect away from these problems. So they got someone in their ear saying, get away from that negativity. Well, right after that clip, you guys, 2,000 people died on the Iberian Peninsula. I don't know how many died throughout the rest of Europe. We were reading in that article about how the UK was having all sorts of issues with their infrastructure because they're not built to withstand that kind of heat. So it's a sad commentary, the way that the media is complicit in all of this because they are so financially intertwined with the very industries that stand to profit from the climate catastrophe. And we also, I didn't bring anything up about this, but it looks like Democrats are going to pass some form of climate legislation, which is going to be grossly inadequate, right? They're calling it historic because it's something like $400 billion. But you guys, for comparison, like we're going to spend something like 10 trillion on the military in the 10 years that we're going to spend 400 billion on the planet. And I've seen a number of experts bemoaning how much compromise was made to get that bill passed, that it's not going to be nearly as substantial as Biden and the Democrats would have you believe. Of course, you guys, I'd rather see it passed than not. Like I'm not, we can't, there are people who want to be accelerationists about politics. You can't be accelerationists about the climate. It doesn't work. You can't sacrifice the short term for the long term when this is an issue that could be an existential threat to us in the coming years, or already really is an existential threat to us. We have already crossed these lines of no return, or crossed lines that would take us centuries to get back. So at this point, it's about mitigating damage, and we still refuse to act in any substantial way. 400 billion, that sounds like some huge number to us, right? Like if any of us were worth 400 billion, it would be a humongous number. But when we're talking about a country of over 350 million or whatever we're at now, people, that's just not all that much. Just look at the military budget. Look at how much we spend on other things like research and development checks for corporations or what have you, bailing big businesses out during COVID, like the airline industry or what have you. We're going to talk about the microchips bill that just passed here in a moment. That's another example. Just throw money at the big corporations, ignore the planet. Throw money at war and the military contractors, ignore the planet. Bemoan the increase to the deficit or debt if it's anything to do with helping people or turning around the climate crisis, but happily play along when it comes to anything to do with war or helping corporations or banks. And the media complicit because, as I mentioned earlier, they are owned by these corporations. They are financially intertwined with these banks and other industries. They take large amounts in advertising dollars from the military-industrial complex, etc., from military contractors who, benefit from the military-industrial complex. I've said this before, but I often feel the need to say it. Like, why is Boeing advertising their jets on CNN, you guys? You can't afford a Boeing jet. They're not anticipating that they'll have an increase in sales from their advertising on CNN. What they're anticipating is, first of all, keeping their name recognition high and positive, but also they know that they're buying positive coverage from CNN whenever it comes to any sort of foreign issue or controversy, foreign policy issue where they stand to financially benefit. So, it's a really sad story, and it could be a significant portion of our downfall as a fucking species, and the at least crippling of life on this planet because of our inaction and our decision to choose corporate profits over having a fucking habitable place to live. And then you also have, of course, the other capitalists who are deciding to exploit this to spend a bunch of money on their own personal space adventures, which don't seem to bear much fruit for science or anything that could be deemed part of the collective good. Anyway, this climate crisis became very obvious with the heat wave that went through Europe, and I thought that it was worth talking about. It's really something that I should cover more often than I do. I try to touch on it every week, you guys, but it's one of those issues that I don't think any media outlet really covers enough. It's an existential threat. And, the fact that these things get hung up over a multimillionaire fossil fuel invested, corporate conservative asshole like Joe Manchin and the others who are happy to hide behind him. It's just a very sad commentary on the state of politics in this country, and that the media goes along with it without really making much effort to call it out is sort of an added layer to that. So we need to take action right now. I'm glad to see that there's going to be a bill passed at all in Congress and in the Senate there, but it's it's far too little, far too late, and the Democrats will try to frame it as historic. And what's really bad? It's actually even worse than what I just said, because it is historic, and yet it still is grossly, failing to meet the moment and failing to meet the needs of the planet. It by a wide margin, you guys. We need to spend trillions on the climate over the next 10 years, and this is 400 billion. I mean, it's inadequate by very large measures. So. It's just a very sad commentary on the state of things. And I don't know what else to say that could make that a little less depressing. I'm not going to be like those news anchors that are like, oh, you meteorologists, you know what I mean? This is a depressing, terrifying topic. And I think we all should be shaking in our boots to some degree and doing much more to force the hands of those in power who are refusing to act.